Okay, guys, big news just came out. So, according to On3, there's an article, and we'll dive deeper into the article. But the U.S. Department of Education released a memo on Title IX and NIL on Thursday, clarifying questions on whether revenue sharing payments from schools must follow the parameters of Title IX. The federal law protects students from sex based discrimination at any school that receives federal funding and stipulates schools must provide male and female athletes with equal treatment and benefits. In the memo released Thursday, future revenue distributions from an institution to athletes for NIL rights are classified as financial assistance. If not proportionally divided, schools would risk violating Title IX. Does that mean that they have to pay equal NIL to women's sports and men's sports? Guys, we're about to dive in. We're about to talk about this. This could be a really big deal. I'm excited to dive into it with you guys. Before we get into it, guys, like the video. If you're a Big 12 fan, subscribe to the channel. It's the Big 12 Football Digest. If you're a fan of any Big 12 team, we've got recruiting videos for all the players that are committing to you guys, and any breaking news. I'm trying to get you guys content as soon as possible. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the rest of this. Another quote: when a school provides athletic financial assistance in forms other than scholarships or grants, including compensation for the use of a student athlete's NIL, such assistance also must be made proportionally available to male and female athletes, the U.S. Department of Education memo stated. For the 25-26 academic year, schools will operate with revenue sharing caps, or with a revenue sharing cap of $20.5 million if the House versus NCAA settlement is officially agreed on this spring. Many schools were planning to allocate 15 to 17 million to football. Thursday's memo will significantly impact those plans. Guys, I'm going to read this one back to you. This is a big one. For the 25-26 academic year, schools will operate with a revenue sharing cap of $20.5 million if the House versus NCAA settlement is officially agreed on this spring. Many schools were planning to allocate 15 to 17 million to football. Thursday's memo will significantly impact those plans. Now, let me dive in a little on what that means, guys. So 15 to 17 million, that's 75 to 80% of the 85% of the total NIL budget for the majority of schools was going to be planned and divvied up to go to football. Why? Because football for almost every school is by far the number one revenue generating sport, right? You guys have been, if you've been following college football at all and not living under a rock, you know that NIL in the modern era is what is driving good players to go to schools and stay or leave a good school. NIL has completely changed the game, and this type of news is wild, guys. I want to hear what you guys are thinking. I'm going to give you guys some more thoughts in a second, but before I do so, comment down below. How are you guys feeling about this right now, right? I think one big question is, and it states in this article, that if the House versus NCAA settlement is officially agreed on this spring, does this impact the House versus NCAA settlement? Does this make it so? What does this do to that settlement? Would the schools rather keep it with the boosters and keep it out of the hands of the schools, or do they still want it to be in the hands of the schools? Because I can tell you guys, I don't think anyone planned on it being handled this way. I mean, everyone knows what Title IX is. If you guys aren't familiar, as the article was talking about, I don't want to misquote myself, but basically what it is, any financial assistance you give to men for men's sports, you have to give an equal amount to women for women's sports. You can have whatever opinion you'd like on that, but NIL is a different situation. NIL is like the disparity between men of, like, in the past, when you would get a scholarship as a football player, your scholarship was worth just as much. If you're an Ohio State football player on scholarship, your scholarship is worth just as much as the other Ohio State football player on scholarship, whether you're a quarterback or a tight end or an offensive lineman. Didn't matter, right? The scholarships are of equal value. Now, that would not be the case. NIL has made it so you could have two scholarship players, right? And this guy is a second string guy on scholarship, earning his spot in the future and being on the roster developing. The other guy is a quarterback, a top 10 quarterback in the country. The top 10 quarterback in the country is easily making $1 million a year, where the second string offensive lineman is probably lucky to make 100,000. So with the Title IX situation, this is such a different scenario than what Title IX was meant to do. And I think this is going to be a wild ride to see how this plays out. Again, Title IX was meant to say, hey, let's make sure there's an even playing field, that for financial assistance to go to college, that women have just as much of an opportunity as men. Again, you can have whatever opinion you want on that. It is very different because the scholarship value of each man or each woman is the same amount. I can't even imagine what this would look like, right? Like what because in football, you're going to have the NIL dollars for the men going, the vast majority are going to go to 3 to 5 players. Like that's just how it's going to work out. You're going to pay big money to big names that you either want to get on your roster or want to keep on your roster. And that is not what it would look like for female sports, at least in my knowledge. It would, I mean, if you had to give basically $10 million to each group, the men would be at a huge disparity. Like the bottom totem pole of the men would be making nothing because all the money would go to the top guys, whereas the women, it'd probably be a much more even split. So wild to think about, guys. Before, if you've lasted this long on the video, this is nuts stuff. Like the video, comment down below. Do you think that this is going to change the revenue sharing plans? Do you think this is going to put a kibosh on it? Also, if it were to go through, what are your thoughts on the idea that the revenue sharing would have to go equally to female sports and to male sports? I want to know what you guys are thinking. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell if you're a Big 12 fan. Any team in the Big 12, we put out a ton of Big 12 content for your team. I guarantee it. I am out of here, guys. Have a great night. Go Big 12.